The drop shot is one of the #1 ways to catch bass, as it works in almost every fishery and every type of cover. We will be covering the biggest mistakes with the setup of the drop shot rig, the mistake I used to make when fishing a drop shot rig, and the misconceptions of bait choices for a drop shot rig. So stay tuned to the end of the video and you'll be catching more fish on a drop shot in no time. While the drop shot is a relatively easy technique to fish and the gear is pretty basic, there's a few things about my gear that I did over the years that have started to catch me more fish, land me more fish, ultimately just make drop shot fishing a lot easier and more effective. We're gonna retie another drop shot on here right now and we're gonna show you all those things. Starting with the rod, this is a 7-foot medium fast action spinning rod. That's all you really need for a drop shot. It's not that important, just have a sensitive rod with a fast tip so you can feel what's down there. This is a Cash and Core series. I also have a Cash and Ned rig rod. If you wanna check anything out that I'll talk about throughout today's video, it will be in the description down below, but you could use any spinning rod you already have. My biggest tip with fishing a drop shot is that right there. That lime green braid is super important. I put 15-pound test lime green braid on here. It's gonna allow you to know when your bait's on the bottom. It's also gonna allow you to know when a fish has grabbed it, and it's gonna make it very sensitive for you to feel what's on the bottom, what your bait's doing, and if a fish has picked it up. So not only will it let you keep your bait on the bottom, make it more efficient to fish, but it'll also let you know when you get more bites so you can get better hook sets and land more fish. I also tie a fluorocarbon leader on here of about 10 to 15 foot. This is 8-pound test today. You can use whatever size you need to get away with for the day, but that is very important so that those fish don't see that lime green braid. So I always have the fluorocarbon leader, I always have the braid. I used to fish straight fluorocarbon. You get a ton of line twist because of the way that a drop shot works through the water. It's not as sensitive, you're not gonna feel as much down there, and a lot of times you have too much stretch in your line to get a good hook set on some fish, especially deep water fish. And then have a good spinning reel. This is a Shimano Sedona 2500. It doesn't have to be this exact one, but use a very good spinning reel with the most important feature being the drag. You want that super smooth so that if a fish comes up and you're fishing this light line, it is a finesse technique after all. If that fish comes up and surges next to the boat, you're not gonna break off, especially if you have like a nick in your line or something like that, because your spinning reel drag wasn't set properly or doesn't work properly. So that's very important, all with your rod and reel setup right there. The last two things you need besides a bait, which we're gonna cover later, is a hook and a sinker. So for hooks, there are two kinds of hooks that I like to use. Today we're gonna be using an open hook drop shot, but I also like to use a Texas rig drop shot sometimes. So the #1 hook that I like to use for a drop shot, more often than not, this will get the job done, is just a size 1 drop shot hook right there. So nothing special, just an open hook. I've tried the 6th Sense drop shot hooks. I've used the Gamakatsu finesse drop shot hooks, the Aaron Martin split shot drop shot hooks. Bunches of them out there. Size 1 is my favorite size. It's just small enough to be very finesse and get a lot of bites, but it's also big enough that if you hook a big smallmouth or something like that, you can get them just good enough that you can get them in the boat if you play them right on light line and good drag. So I Palomar knot my drop shot on here. One big key, this is a pretty basic rigging technique, so I wouldn't classify it as a mistake, but always take your tag end when you're making a drop shot and put it down through the eye of the hook with the hook facing upward rather than the other way, so that it will make your bait stand out on the end. If you put it the other way, your hook will actually end up upside down on the line like that, and you'll lose fish because they bite up atop and you'll be hooking them underneath their chin. They'll come off a little bit easier. The other hook I like to use are these guys right here, the RoboWorm rebarb hooks, or the VMC finesse drop shots. I have the owner cover shots. I have the Mustad grip pin hooks. All that really matters is some type of a drop shot hook that is a long straight shank with a bait keeper up on the front so that I can Texas rig my bait. I will be able to fish a bait around grass, stumps, brush piles, and I won't lose fish, but I also won't snag and get a ton of lost baits either. So those are the two types of hooks that I like to use. They're very important. And then the last thing is a weight. So you need a weight to actually fish your drop shot. I almost exclusively, mostly because I pour them myself and have the mold, almost exclusively use a pencil weight. A teardrop weight does work better in rock cover, but the drop shot mold that I have, one, they're very cheap and easy to pour, and two, it comes in all the sizes. So the biggest trick to actually not getting snagged is less about the shape of your weight and more about the size of your weight. So if you are getting snagged every single time you cast out there, it is because your weight is too heavy and is falling down into everything so fast, and like you're punching cover essentially. If it's too heavy, it will punch down through whatever's down there on the bottom and cause you to get hung up. So then just go to a lighter weight size and slowly lighten your weight up until you can feel it drag over the top and look natural without getting snagged. So that's very, very important. I am using a 1/4 ounce today. I have everything from a 1/16 up to a 5/8, and I have every little increment along the way so that I can change that drop shot size as I need to keep it down there on the bottom. So we just rigged up an entire drop shot right there. That's all you need to know to get this thing ready to fish. So now let's actually put a bait on here and let's get up on the front deck and show you some retrieval mistakes that you shouldn't be making that I used to do all the time when I was fishing a drop shot. To explain mistake number 2 to you, let me first start by telling you a story. I once fished a tournament with my dad. I had found an absolute mega school of bass that I was catching on a drop shot. He does not fish much, I fish all the time. So we end up going to fish this tournament together, and I give us both a drop shot, and I would cast my drop shot out there, let it sink down to the bottom, and then I would gently shake the rod tip like this and try and impart action into the bait and like shake the drop shot like I thought you're supposed to fish it. My dad was sitting on the back deck back there. He would throw his drop shot out there just like that. He would let it sink down to the bottom and then point his rod about halfway down at the rod bottom like this and slowly wind it in, just like this. One of us caught 19 pounds and the other person held the net all day. Can you guess who was who? From that day, I realized that sometimes shaking your slack like that, like you're supposed to fish a drop shot, actually imparts too much movement into the bait and can make it look unnatural. This is a finesse technique after all. You want that thing to look as natural as possible. So like right now I have this flatworm on here that's supposed to mimic a little bait fish just kind of gently cruising down the water or coming down this current as like an injured bait fish. When you're shaking your slack, you can make that bait dart up and down, up off the bottom and do all kinds of erratic movements, and it doesn't look right. Now what I do when I fish a drop shot is I throw it out there, I let it sink down to the bottom. I know my bait's on the bottom. I'll point my rod about 9 o'clock and I'll just slowly lift up. And you can feel your weight kind of just ticking along the bottom. And I don't want to get too high over my head. You'll end up missing fish that way. This is probably too high up here. I try to keep it about 9 o'clock and I lift up till about 11. And then I'll let it sink back down. Hopefully it didn't leave the bottom, but if it did leave the bottom or you pulled it off a drop, let it sink back down and watch your braid. I'll pull it another couple feet, I'll let it sink. I'll pull it another couple feet, I'll let it sink, and I reel up my slack in between, but I'm not reeling or moving it while I'm dragging the bait. So I'll just drag it a little bit and let it sit. I almost fish it like a Carolina rig now. So I'll literally drag it. Sometimes I pull it to the side like this. I'll pull it sideways, let it sit. So next time you're out fishing with a drop shot, instead of shaking your line, try dragging your bait nice and slow on the bottom. You'll feel more, and ideally, you'll get your bait in the right spots and you'll catch more fish because your bait's gonna look a lot more natural. So now that you know the proper gear and the right way to fish the drop shot, let's talk about my favorite thing, which is bait selection. We all know that the only bait you can fish on a drop shot is the flatworm, right? You have to just use these 4-inch little finesse soft plastics. That's the only way you can fish a drop shot. Wrong. That's what I used to think all the time. I would use nothing but flatworms and dream shots and 6th Sense glitch, all those types of like small little finesse baits like that. And it catches fish. Don't get me wrong. There are days where you will pound them on the flatworm like this. However, I recently started playing around with some different bait options, and it has opened up a world of drop shot fishing that I didn't even know existed. So the flatworm is an excellent choice. If you're fishing for smallmouth, you're fishing open water, open hook, rocky areas, great bait for smallmouth. However, there's a couple things that I've tried over the years. So if you have fish that are feeding on bait fish, this guy right here is an excellent choice on a drop shot. Again, this is kind of in the same realm as the flatworm. You're not getting too advanced with this one, but this is the Z-Man Streaks 375, also the Baby Z2. They make excellent drop shot baits. You can nose hook them. They look like little bait fish darting around there on the bottom. That's an excellent option. But if they're also feeding on bait fish, this guy right here is a great option as well on a place like right behind me. We're fishing this dam that has a bunch of current that dumps down here. So I've started using this guy on those current scenarios, places like the St. Lawrence and stuff like that, or just if you like fishing in a lake and you drag your bait slow enough. This is the 6th Sense Party Minnow, the 3-inch version. They also are coming out with a bigger size here in the very near future, but you can see that tail right there is so soft and thin that when you hook this on a drop shot, as you drag it, this is gonna swim like it's a swim bait on a swim bait head. And then if you hold it in place in the current, it's gonna face upstream in the current and just keep swimming while it's held in place with that drop shot weight down there on the bottom. Something super cool that not a lot of people do. It is starting to become a little bit of a trend. If you've been looking at some of the Bassmaster Opens or Elite Series results on the St. Lawrence River, you'll notice a lot of swim baits that look like the Party Minnow, whether it's the Hazdong Shad or the Party Minnow, or there's a few other ones out there. You'll notice a lot of the realistic minnow profiles with a very thin tail being fished on a drop shot and catching a lot of fish. So that is an excellent way to catch some smallmouth and do that. My next wild card is to take this guy right here, the Busa Ned, or you could use the Z-Man TRD. Either one will work on this technique. And to nose hook it, you can fish it like that. The TRD especially will literally float. So when you hook it, if you sit it in place, that will float up in the middle. This one doesn't float as good. It'll still float, but not like a Z-Man will literally float straight up and down. So if you have 13 inches of leader, it's floating 13 inches off the bottom. 2 foot, same thing. But what I'll do with this guy, or I'll use the Yamamoto Senkos for this too, I'll wacky rig this. And you can put it on a wacky rig, and I'll put a 2 or 3 foot leader on my drop shot weight here. It's a long, long leader, but what you can do is you can fish a wacky rig down in 20 foot of water. You can throw that thing out there, it'll sink all the way down to the bottom, and then it will shimmy the rest of the way down that last 2 or 3 foot. Basically that weightless fall, because your weight's already on the bottom, so it'll shimmy down. Then you can work your bait back up again and it'll shimmy back up off the bottom, and then it'll shimmy back down. I've done it, it caught a lot of fish doing that too. It's an excellent way to catch them. And then my last wild card, this has quickly become my favorite to catch a lot of fish in the summer up here in the Northeast, especially largemouth bass. That's what I use the Texas rig hook for. A robo worm right here, this is the 6-inch robo worm in Morning Dawn, or the 6-inch Divine Shaky Worm. Either one, color doesn't matter, I play with color all the time. But one of those baits, just a simple 6-inch straight tail worm, I'll Texas rig it on that drop shot, and I will fish it in some very heavy cover and catch a lot of big largemouth doing that technique. I will be doing a video on that in the very near future as that bite starts to heat up. We'll talk a lot of detail about fishing these guys specifically and how to find fish and catch them like that. But that is an awesome technique on the drop shot as well. So I named probably 5 or 6 baits right there that are not a flatworm or a dream shot, and different ways that you can fish and catch fish with a drop shot. So it's a way that you can open up your fishing and catch a whole lot more fish with this bait. And while the drop shot is an excellent technique to catch a ton of fish, there are some days when the fish do not want that bait suspended up off the bottom and to come up and get it. On those days, I really like to use this bait right here. So go ahead and check that video out if you want to use that bait in combination with this bait. On the toughest days of fishing, you will always be getting bites. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Hit the subscribe button down below if you did. Leave a like as well, and thanks for watching.